Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this time we're taking a look at Shadow of the Giants by Ian Livingstone, with art by Mike McCarthy and a fantastic map of Allansia by Ryan McGee. It was released in 2022 by Scholastic Books, the same year as Secrets of Salamonis, which we covered on the last main episode. I think we all know what to expect from an Ian Livingstone book at this point. I imagine there will be a good, strong narrative, but not much in the way of complex design. I'll be amazed if there isn't a collection of items we need to find in order to beat the book, and I'm guessing my dice, which have been quiet of late, will be getting a proper workout. Artist Mike McCarthy is less of a known quantity than the writer. He's an artist and illustrator who has worked in the video games industry mostly, most notably on the Fable games. His style is quite interesting in that it combines an exaggerated cartoonish quality with very strong fundamentals of anatomy and perspective. His work reads like comic book art, but with more detailed shading than you'd expect. I like it. I think it strikes a good balance between the classic illustration style of yesteryear with a more modern sensibility, and I do like how well realised the backgrounds are. He also did the cover art, which shows some armoured giants smashing a village in front of a dark red sky. It's very characterful, and I especially like the villager fleeing in the foreground who is riding a pig. Let's take a look at the rules. There is almost nothing to say here because this is the complete old school fighting fantasy rules package, except for the absence of any rules for fighting more than one opponent. So we have skill, stamina and luck all present and correct, and we start with 10 provisions, a sword, leather armour and even the potion of skill, stamina or luck. Given that this is the 40th anniversary book, I think there's a lot to be said for running that nostalgia train as hard and fast as possible. I have created a character who I've decided to call Muggins Breakfaster, because that sounds like a suitably heroic name. Muggins has a skill of 10, a stamina of 21 and a luck of 8. I have therefore decided to take the potion of luck for that +1 initial luck that it provides, given that my luck is a little on the low side. The book is pretty insistent that you can make it through with poor stats, but I'm not sure I believe it. I've been lied to about that too many times to count in the Fighting Fantasy series. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's play Shadow of the Giants. Background. Less than a day's walk from Firetop Mountain, Anvil is a bustling mining town which began as a small settlement and grew quickly following the discovery of gold in nearby caves. The menfolk are mostly gold miners, whilst the womenfolk are the lawmakers, who mete out tough justice to wrongdoers found guilty of any crime. There was never a lot to see or do in Anvil. Visitors were few other than the local farmers selling their produce or sneaky thieves who slipped into town to try their luck on unsuspecting citizens. The only other outsiders in town were the rugged dwarf gold miners hired in from nearby Stonebridge. Eager to shake hands with everybody, the dwarfs would greet people with an outstretched hand and a beaming smile. The residents soon learned to avoid their handshakes, since a dwarf miner's huge, big-knuckled hands would crush theirs, which, if it happened, would send the dwarves into fits of laughter. It was all a game to them. Following a long stint in the mines, the dwarves would let off steam by taking part in arm wrestling contests in the noisy taverns of Anvil, risking their hard-earned pay in wages. Most were bad losers, and many a punch was thrown following a loss in a close-fought contest. So some interesting details of life in Anvil. Dwarves have proper bone-crushing handshakes. Who knew? Travelling merchants avoided the mining town, so the mayor built a permanent market in the town square. She made a deal with the merchants of Guard for Anvil to become the eastern terminus for their trade routes across the pagan plains. The new market quickly became popular, attracting both the merchants of Guard and people from the surrounding villages. While some of them would fall foul to a miner's handshake or a sly thief, the market boomed. You are an adventurer who has recently arrived in Anvil to buy a new sword to replace the one you broke, forcing a dungeon door open on a quest to find a treasure chest. The treasure chest contained a map and 50 gold pieces. That's a lot of gold. Or is it? Who knows? I'm going to go out on a limb and say it is a lot of gold. I thought it said that I had a sword. Yeah, the rules do actually say that you have a sword. So the less than 100% robust Fighting Fantasy proofreading strikes again. You are eager to go on another quest, this time to Firetop Mountain. There were scribblings on the back of the map which described a large quantity of gold concealed in a secret room by the warlock Zagor. But you dare not venture into the monster-filled passageways beneath Firetop Mountain without a new sword. Wary of Anvil's thieves, you hide half your gold pieces in your clothing and half inside a secret pocket in your backpack. It is early morning and you are walking through Anvil's crowded market, looking at the various stalls. You are not alone. The market is busy with people, buying cloth, food, spices, weapons and tools from the brightly robed merchants who make shrill cries to attract their customers. Unable to find a sword to your liking, you are about to leave the market when you feel a tug on your arm. You turn around and see a scrawny, one-legged old man in scruffy clothes peering up at you through half-closed eyes, his mouth hanging open. Wow, we have already had an old man. We haven't even made it out of the background section, and we've got an old man. Truly, this is a classic Fighting Fantasy book. I saw you looking at those swords back there. None took your fancy, did they? He says in a scratchy voice. Maybe I can help. Dunbar Lap's my name, and selling is my game. I know someone who has the best swords in town. Much better quality than anything those swindlers from Card have got to offer. Interested? The old man appears harmless enough, and you tell him to take you to the sword seller. He leads you out of the market and down a narrow street, his wooden crutch tapping sharply on the cobblestones. Don't entirely think that this man is trustworthy. Just a feeling I've got. Oh yes, come and buy my wonderful swords that are just down this dark alley with no exits. The top floors of the creaking wooden houses on both sides of the street jut out overhead, and when you hear a shrill cry of "Look out below!" from above, you just manage to avoid being drenched by a bucket of dirty water tossed out of an upstairs window. You were lucky that was water. Sometimes it isn't, Dunbar says, chuckling. You pass the locals on their way to the market, but they pay you no attention. Dunbar talks non-stop, telling you in gruesome detail how he lost his leg to a snow wolf in the Icefinger Mountains when he was young. You arrive at a shop with heavy wooden shutters pulled back from the window. Here we are, swords and shields, he announces proudly, with a sweeping gesture of the hand. He invites you to go in, saying, Amaric stocks every type of sword you could ever want. You'll see you're right. I'll wait for you outside and trust you'll tip me later. So that is the opening. I guess teasing the idea of going back to Firetop Mountain yet again. Again, not going to complain hugely about that. In 2022, Fighting Fantasy is all about the nostalgia. So I think going to Firetop Mountain would be quite nice, particularly if we get to see a different side of Firetop Mountain. That would be really interesting. We've already had a fun remix of Firetop Mountain, but yeah, I don't have a problem with going back there again. A small brass bell jingles overhead as you walk through the doorway into the shop. Inside you see a huge display of swords and shields mounted on the walls. On the floor to your left there is a wooden barrel full of spears, and on your right a collection of daggers and axes sticking out of an old tree stump. Wearing leather armour to protect him, a tall man with a flat nose and thick brown hair is standing behind the counter opposite with his arms folded. He looks at you suspiciously as you enter and reaches down to produce a wooden club from under the counter. You're not from these parts, stranger. How can I help you? He asks in a firm voice. Will you ask him if he knows Dunbar Lap? Tell him that you'd like to buy a sword or jump over the counter and attack him. The urge to take the obviously stupid option of jumping over the counter to attack him is strong, but I'm going to discount that because it's far too early to be making stupid decisions. So I think we'll ask him if he knows Dunbar Lap out of curiosity about the old man. The armourer puts down his wooden club. Dunbar Lap? No, never heard of him. Why? You explain that Dunbar Lap brought you to his shop to buy a sword. The man bursts out laughing and says, Of course I know Dunbar. He's a good man who brings me lots of customers. This is your lucky day. You are the 100th customer he has brought to me this year, which means that you are entitled to a free dagger if you buy one of my swords. What do you say? Whilst waiting for your reply, he takes one sword down from the wall and another from under the counter. "These are the best I have," he says in a friendly voice. "The sword with the engraved blade is the vampire sword, which was designed for slaying the undead. I'm only asking for 10 gold pieces for it. The sword with the flame-coloured grip is the fire sword, which is best for fighting fire-breathing creatures. At 15 gold pieces, it is a bargain." "Do you want to buy a sword?" Yes, I do, because I don't have a sword. Although, possibly I do have a sword, as I currently have Schrodinger's sword. So, the fire sword is more expensive, which makes me think that it may be more useful. But things that breathe fire can usually be harmed by any kind of sword, whereas undead things, if you do run into them, they're quite often immune to non-magical damage. So, on balance, I think I'm going to take the vampire sword. I will say that the armourer's sense of humour leaves a little bit to be desired. Emmerich thanks you for buying the sword and says, "I think you'll be very happy with your choice." He gives you a shiny dagger which you tuck inside your boot. Before shaking your hand and bidding you farewell, you go outside where you find Dunbar Lapp waiting for you. He smiles when he sees your sword and cannot conceal his excitement. "I hope you are pleased with your new weapon," he asks enthusiastically. You tell him you are more than happy with your purchase and the gift of a dagger. You drop 2 gold pieces into his hand as a tip, thank him for his help, and wave goodbye. Gold now 38. Your thoughts return to Firetop Mountain and the legendary treasures hidden inside. You are keen to try your luck, but you are also aware of the dangers which lie inside the deadly tunnels. You reason that it would be better to team up with somebody who has knowledge of the mountain to give you a better chance of survival. You decide to see if you can hire a miner to accompany you on your quest. The best place to find the dwarfs would be in a tavern where they will be likely letting off steam. You walk briskly through the back streets and arrive at a tavern by the name of the Double Duck, from where you can hear a lot of shouting and screaming coming from inside. Is it a Wetherspoons? You poke your head round the tavern door and see a fight going on between 2 dwarves who are rolling around on the floor, knocking lumps out of each other. It is definitely a Wetherspoons. The other dwarves in the tavern are swinging back tankards of frothy ale and cheering on the brawling pair. The tall barman suddenly rings a brass bell to end the fight and declare who won. The bruised dwarves stand up and give each other a hug before staggering over to the bar, where the winner buys the loser a drink. With order restored, the dwarves sit down at the tables, laughing, joking, and recounting tales of their mining exploits. There is a picture of the bar at the Double Duck, and it is, very, very exciting. There's maybe a bit of license been taken on the description, as the artist has gone for a slightly more expansive barroom brawl than the one we've witnessed, with 2 dwarves indeed knocking lumps out of each other, but another one behind them yelling in rage, armed with a barrel that he seems to be about to smash over someone's head. There's a human with a club also getting involved, and the barman looks decidedly frightened by the whole business. It's a really nice little bit of work. I'll forgive them taking a little bit of liberty with the core description when the action it's depicting is this exciting. It's great. One of the dwarves sitting at the nearest table to the door points at you and says, "Why, Sunshine, do you fancy your chances at arm wrestling? 2 gold pieces says I can beat you. Do you want to accept the challenge, or would you rather sit down at another table?" I think I'll do some arm wrestling to try and get in with this dwarf and hopefully put him in a good mood and be willing to join me on a little jaunt to Firetop Mountain. You sit down opposite the dwarf, who shakes your hand, grinning confidently. He tries to crush your fingers, but you give as good as you get. A crowd quickly gathers around the table, shouting encouragement as you lock hands in earnest to begin the contest. But imagine a world so bleak that people are genuinely excited to watch arm wrestling. Arm wrestling, arguably a less good spectator sport than thumb wrestling. You lock hands. A crowd quickly gathers around the table, shouting encouragement as you lock hands in earnest to begin the contest. You stare each other down as the barman gives the countdown. 3, 2, 1, heave! Roll 2 dice and add the total to the dwarf's skill of 10. Roll 2 dice again and add the total to your skill. If your total is the same or higher than that of the dwarf, you win the contest. If it is lower, you lose the contest. So, with my skill of 10, this should be a doddle. So let's see what the dwarf rolls. He rolls a 7. I do not think that is going to be good enough. That gives him a total of 14. I roll 12. Yeah, bit of a waste. How many double sixes are you going to get in an adventure? I've just wasted one on arm wrestling and underpowered dwarf. Never mind, it does mean that I have well and truly won with a total of 22. The dwarf curses, annoyed with himself for losing the contest. Wiggy lost! Wiggy lost! Shout his friends, cackling with laughter, some of them spilling their ale while raising their mugs to toast your victory. The dwarf is reluctant at first to pay up, but eventually flicks 2 gold pieces across the table, looking at you with a face like thunder. You thank him, stand up and look round for somewhere else to sit down. So I haven't really gotten on his good side. That's not been super helpful, but I do now have 40 gold. You walk over to an alcove at the back of the double duck and sit down opposite 2 dwarfs who are playing a noisy game of dice. The older one, with a longer beard, is accusing the other one of cheating. You cough loudly to get their attention and introduce yourself by asking if either of them would like to join you on a treasure hunting trip to Firetop Mountain. They put down their dice and say they are both very interested in joining you on your quest. They claim to have explored the tunnels of Firetop Mountain before. The older dwarf, with ginger hair and a long beard, drooping moustache and ruddy cheeks, is called Higley, and tells you he is experienced and trustworthy. He asks for an advance payment of 4 gold pieces and a share of half the treasures found. The younger dwarf, with the long brown hair and a shorter beard, is called Ghibli, who says he is a fearless fighter and would join you for an immediate payment of 2 gold pieces plus a third of the treasures found. I'm going to go with the cheaper option. I think Higley is trying to rip me off. 4 gold pieces and half the treasure for basically providing a few pointers. Feels like daylight robbery to me. So yeah, I'm going to go with the significantly lower tender. Takes me back down to 38 gold. Makes me feel like a local authority commissioning binman. Higley shrugs his shoulders and says, "No hard feelings, I'm sure Ghibli will serve you well. Good luck, you'll need it." He gets up from the table and saunters over to the bar to join the other miners. Ghibli smiles and says, "Don't worry about grumpy old Higley, he's just jealous. You made the right decision. When do you want to set off?" You reply that you would like to get going as soon as possible. Ghibli says this is fine with him, as he needs to be back in Anvil the day after tomorrow for his gold mining job. You chat about your plan of action over a bowl of thick vegetable soup, a speciality of the tavern. Ghibli wipes his mouth with the back of his sleeve and stands up. "That was delicious," he says, belching. "Now I need to get my axe, backpack and water bottle from my room. If you give me 3 gold pieces, 2 for me and 1 to buy some climbing gear, I'll be back in under an hour." You give him the gold coins and watch him walk out onto the street. I think I might have been done like a kipper. You spend the next hour watching the dwarves arm wrestle and sing. As time passes, you are beginning to wonder what's happened to Ghibli, when Higley strolls over and says casually, "You're fooling yourself if you think he's coming back. He'll be down the mines by now. This is not the first time he's run off with someone's money." You can hardly believe what Higley tells you. Do you want to wait a little bit longer for Ghibli to come back, or would you rather give up on him and hire Higley instead? Oh dear, I have been done up like a kipper. But do I want to change tack, or do I want to trust the one who I've already given money to? Oh, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to end up a mug whatever I do. I'm going to give Ghibli a little bit longer to come back, I think. I'm going to hope like hell that it's actually Higley who's the wrong one and not Ghibli. Higley shakes his head and says, "Don't hold your breath. I'll be over there if you need me." You watch him walk over to a group of dwarves who are playing cards. You wait for Ghibli for another 30 minutes until it dawns on you that he really isn't coming back. Lose 1 luck point. Luck now 7. This is going well already, as is traditional. You walk over to Higley, who greets you by saying, "If you want me to join you on your Firetop Mountain adventure, my fee has now gone up to 6 gold pieces in advance. That's the price for doubting me." You have no choice but to agree to his terms, so gold now 31. Higley holds out his hand for you to count out the gold coins. He thanks you with a nod of his head and says enthusiastically, "Firetop Mountain awaits us. I'm ready to go when you are." He grabs his axe, a coil of rope and his backpack from behind the bar and follows you out of the tavern. You tell Higley that you want to set off immediately, but he says that he never goes treasure hunting without first going to see Mystic Mary, the local soothsayer, who always gives helpful advice. Do you want to visit the soothsayer, or would you rather leave Anvil without further delay? No, let's visit the soothsayer. Higley leads you through the back streets of Anvil before turning down a narrow alleyway. You grip the hilt of your sword, wary that he might be leading you into a trap, but your fears are quickly allayed when you arrive outside a small house at the end of the alleyway, which has a door with the words Mystic Mary on the nameplate. Higley opens the door and walks in without waiting to be asked. You follow him inside a small room where you see a young woman with long black hair sitting in a rocking chair and stroking a black cat on her lap in front of an open fireplace. She's wearing a long black dress and has a red shawl wrapped around her neck. So there is a picture of Mystic Mary, and she is indeed sitting in a rocking chair and petting a black cat. Oh, it's a lovely picture. I really like the black cat, who looks skinny and slightly sinister. The young woman, really nicely rendered. The rocking chair is big and impressive. There's a piggy bank on a stool next to her, and you can see another cat up in the rafters of the room, which, even though it's very small, seems to have an awful lot of height, which, creates a really kind of impactful and mysterious setting for the action. Yeah, I really like it. She looks at you out of the corner of her eyes and with a hint of a smile says, "Welcome. I believe you are here to seek my words of wisdom regarding a quest you are about to embark on. If that is indeed the case, please drop 1 gold piece into my little friend here." She points to a small ceramic money box on a small round-top tripod next to her. It is in the shape of a pig with a coin slot in its back. Let's pop a coin in her pig. Gold now 30. Mary closes her eyes and begins to stroke her cat very gently as she recites a short rhyme in a barely audible whisper. "The eyes of a dragon are the gems on its head. Green is life, and red is dead." She opens her eyes again, smiles, and says, "Good luck on your adventure." Higley thanks her for her help and leaves the hut. You follow him outside and ask him what dragon eyes have got to do with Firetop Mountain. Higley shrugs his shoulders and says, "Who knows, but I'm sure Mary's rhyme will aid us in our quest." You repeat the rhyme to memorise it and leave Anvil to begin your treasure hunting quest. You head east, chatting excitedly with Higley about treasure hunting. Ahead, you see the ominous fire-red peak of Firetop Mountain, its menacing steep face strewn with sharp crags of rot jutting from out of it. As you approach the mountain, you see the cave entrance ahead. "Ha! Here we are!" Higley calls out loudly. He pulls his axe from his belt and steps into the gloom. The walls inside the cave are slimy, and there are pools of dank water on the floor which give the air a musty smell. You set off down a passageway at the back of the cave and soon come to a junction. You ask Higley which way you should go, and he replies that going left is pointless, since treasure hunters have long since looted everything in that section of the mountain. You turn right and notice a small hole in the wall. You peer into the cavity, but it is too dark to see what is inside. Do you want to reach into the hole, or would you rather walk on? What I really want to do is make Higley, who I have paid, reach into the hole on my behalf. And then he can have half of whatever's in there, assuming that he survives the experience, but I'm going to reach into the hole myself. You tentatively slide your arm into the hole and are excited when your fingers touch what feels like several coins. While scooping them up, you feel a sharp pain in the back of your hand. You pull your hand out quickly, clutching 4 gold pieces. Your excitement is cut short when you see an angry-looking lump on the back of your hand, where you have been stung by a scorpion. Lose 1 skill point, 2 stamina points, and 1 luck point. Should have got the dwarf to do it. Skill now 9. Stamina now 19. Luck now 6. You curse your misfortune and set off again down the tunnel. You soon arrive at a wooden door which has been smashed open and hangs in pieces on its rusty hinges. You peer into the gloom and see a clay pit just beyond the doorway. Higley ties one end of his climbing rope onto the door hinge before throwing it down the pit. He grins and says, "I'll go first," and grabs the rope to slide down into the pit. "Nothing to see down here," he says, looking up. You tell him not to be so hasty and slide down the rope to join him. You inspect the pit wall carefully and notice a faint vertical crack in the clay. You tell Higley to swing his axe at the wall and hear a dull clang as his blade strikes solid metal. You help him clear away the clay to reveal an iron door, which is etched with figures of fire-breathing dragons, starting to look a lot like maybe should have taken the fire sword rather than the vampire sword. Higley urges caution, but you cannot resist turning the handle. Much to your surprise, it turns, and you pull the creaking door open. You enter a small, stone-walled chamber where you see an ancient wooden chest with thick brass edging on a marble plinth. Although it is quite dark inside the chamber, you can see that the far wall is decorated with a colourful painting of an old bearded wizard in long robes, holding a glass orb from which swirling gases are escaping. A huge dragon appears to be materialising from out of the gases. "That could be a painting of Zagor, the evil warlock who used to live inside the mountain," Higley says excitedly. "This could be his long-lost treasure chest." You walk round the plinth looking for traps before inspecting the chest, which has 2 rows of interlocking dragon teeth securing the lid to the frame of the chest. You can't find a lock, but there are 2 gemstone eyes, one emerald and one ruby, set in the lid, which is shaped like the top of a dragon's skull. Higley suggests that you should try pressing one of the gems which might open the chest. Do you want to press the emerald eye or do you want to press the ruby eye? I've already forgotten which way round it was. I think it was red is dead, because red and dead rhyme, and I'm sure that was part of it, but I could be misremembering. I should have written it down. I really should have written it down. Normally, if I'm playing on my own, I would just remember such a thing, but there's something about reading a book out loud which absolutely plays havoc with my short-term memory. Okay, we'll press the emerald eye. You hear a faint click when you press the emerald eye and watch the lid slowly lift open like a huge mouth. On a red velvet cushion inside, you see a polished iron crown adorned with 4 iron warriors spaced equally apart on the rim. The warriors are all standing to attention with their hands resting on the hilt of their downward pointing swords. "What a fantastic looking crown!" exclaims Higley. "It must have magic powers. I'm going to put it on." Do you want to let Higley try on the crown, or would you like to try it yourself? I will let Higley try on the crown. "Fortune favours the brave," Higley says cheerfully as he places the crown on his head. You watch him lift the velvet cushion out of the chest in the hope of finding more treasure, but there is nothing else inside. "Oh, we might as well take these gems," he says, drawing his dagger. He begins to prise the ruby out of the eye socket when suddenly he drops his dagger. He looks alarmed and grabs the crown with both hands. It's crushing my head," he says with a look of fear in his eyes. He tugs at the crown but is unable to take it off even with your help. It tightens even more around his head, causing him considerable pain, but he manages to climb out of the pit and stagger outside, still pulling on the crown before collapsing on the ground. Daylight has activated the evil magic in a spell that was cast on the iron crown years ago. It drops off Higley's head and rolls away as if being controlled. You watch incredulously as the 4 iron warriors on the rim come alive. They jump down from the crown onto the ground to stand at attention in a circle, swords raised and tips touching. They grow quickly, and within seconds they are towering above you like a group of 5-metre-high iron statues. Although unable to see you, the iron giants sense your presence. Their heads turn towards you in unison, and one swings its huge sword down at you. Roll 2 dice. Is the number rolled less than or equal to your skill score? So with my skill of 9, let's see what happens here. 6. I have succeeded in my skill test. You dive sideways and just manage to avoid being hit by the sword. You jump up and run back into the cave to escape the iron giants. Looking out from the safety of the cave entrance, you watch them continue to grow until they stand some 10 meters tall. Without warning, they all turn round at the same time and slowly stride off west towards the pagan plains, their giant articulated limbs making grating metallic sounds as they walk, and their thumping iron feet crushing anything in their path underfoot. As soon as they are gone, you run outside to where Higley is lying motionless on the ground, barely alive. "Is the crown a chaos? I am doomed," he whispers, struggling to breathe, his face contorted in pain. "The Iron Giants will destroy Allansia. Take the crown to Marek Omyash in Hamelin. He will help you. The magic items you'll need to find in Hamelin. Ah." But before he can finish his sentence, Higley falls silent. His eyes close, never to open again. Guess I can have that 6 gold pieces back. Lose 1 luck point. Luck now 5. Amazingly, I managed to lose 3 luck points without actually rolling a luck test. You place the crown in your backpack and set off southeast towards Hamelin. You look back momentarily to see the iron giants marching slowly on, towering above the trees. An hour later you arrive at the Red River, where you see an old man with a wizened face lying asleep in a rowing boat which has been pulled up on the bank. Would you like to talk to the old man, or would you rather keep on walking along the riverbank? I will talk to the old man. Always talk to old men in fighting fantasy books. You cough loudly to wake up the old man, who leaps up looking startled. He grabs an oar and tells you not to come any closer. Will you ask him if you can hire him to row to Hamelin? Draw your sword, apologise for waking him, and walk on. I will ask him if I can hire him to row me to Hamelin. I feel like that was a remarkably brief adventure in Firetop Mountain. Perhaps even too brief, but I don't want to complain too much because it didn't involve much in the way of trying to decide between identical looking corridors, so that's fine. The old man relaxes and says, "Hamelin is too far for me to row to. In the old days I used to run a ferry service across an underground river inside Firetop Mountain, but people stopped coming. I've retired now, but I'll sell you my boat if that's of interest. Pay me 5 gold pieces and it's yours. Do you want to buy the ferryman's rowboat, or would you rather decline his offer and walk on?" That's a nice little nod to Warlock of Firetop Mountain. Yeah, I fancy going for a little row. I've still got 30 gold pieces. Apparently I didn't rob the dead. You know, it's not like the dwarf was going to have any use for it. It feels like a bit of an oversight. But yeah, I now have 25 gold pieces and a rowing boat. You give the old man 5 gold pieces, after which he hands you the oars. He smiles and says, "You should reach Hamelin before nightfall, but keep an eye out for the giant river snakes." You pull the oars on the boat and push it into the river and jump on board. You turn the boat upstream and pull on the oars as the old man hurries away. You've only gone a few metres when you notice the boat is taking water on board. The bottom of the boat is rotten and has sprung a leak. It fills rapidly with water and begins to sink, and you have no option but to swim back to the bank. You have been swindled by the old ferryman who has sold you a rotten boat. You scramble up to the bank, soaked to the skin. 3 of your provisions are lost in the river. Tragedy. I was looking forward to that plate of devilled eggs, that packet of mini cheddars, and the lemon drizzle cake. Would have made a lovely meal. I also lose 1 luck point, so my luck is now 4. I'm going to drink my potion of luck and get my luck to 9. That's a really strange thing. I don't think I have ever managed to lose half my starting luck without actually making a single roll. You look left and right, but the ferryman is nowhere to be seen. All you see are the iron giants in the distance marching steadily west. There seems to be little you can do but to set off on foot again. I should have realised as soon as he said he used to work for Zagor, the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, that he wasn't someone you'd be advised to trust even slightly. It's not long before you come to an old log cabin which has a small vegetable patch in front of it. Smoke drifts up from the chimney and you see there are 2 saddled horses tethered to a post nearby. Do you want to knock on the door of the cabin, or would you rather keep on walking along the riverbank? Let's knock on the door of the cabin. Not everyone in this neck of the woods is going to be a wrong 'un, surely. You walk up to the front door of the cabin and bang on it with the pommel of your sword. You hear dogs barking ferociously from inside. "Go away or I'll set my dogs on you," a man's angry voice calls out. Do you want to knock on the door again, or would you rather continue walking east along the riverbank? I have no desire to tangle with angry men or angry dogs, so I will pass on, I think. You walk quickly along the riverbank, and it's not long before you come to a grove where you see a bearded man who is tied to an old oak tree. He's wearing a leather waistcoat and has a leather headband to keep his long hair out of his eyes. When he sees you, he calls out, begging you to free him. You look around to make sure it's not a trap before asking the man what happened. "My name is Victor," he replies desperately. "I was on my way from Zengis to the Moonstone Hills when 3 goblins jumped out on me from behind the trees. They took everything I had. Please untie me and I'll be forever in your debt." Do you want to help the man, or would you rather walk on without helping him? Much though I would like to walk on without helping him, because I've been burned quite a few times by taking people at their word in this book, I will actually untie him and help him, because I'm just that good-hearted of a soul when I'm not idly musing about robbing the dead. You walk over to the tree to untie the unfortunate adventurer. He thanks you over and over again and finishes by saying, "Since those greasy goblins stole everything, I have nothing to reward you with except for this lucky charm." He pulls a wooden button off his waistcoat and hands it to you. It is carved in the shape of a clover leaf. The charm can only be used once to make you automatically lucky when you test your luck, after which it will be a simple button again. That seems very helpful. You thank him for the gift, wish him well, and set off again towards Hamelin. Whilst walking along the riverbank, you become aware of the sound of thundering hooves coming from the north. You turn your head and see a cloud of dust rising in the distance. A party of centaurs is galloping towards you with their spears raised in the air. Part man, part horse, they hunt in groups, picking off easy prey to steal their belongings. As they draw closer, you see that there are at least 6 of them, with their leader galloping ahead, brandishing a spear and a shield. There is a picture of the centaurs. It's pretty good, I would say. They look quite savage. There's a quite Warcraft vibe to them, I would say. They do feel a bit Warcrafty with their pointy ears and long beards. But yeah, overall, solid bit of work. Maybe not as nice as some of the other ones we've seen, but still perfectly pleasant. Do you want to stand your ground and fight them, or do you want to dive into the river and swim to the far bank? I don't really fancy fighting 6 centaurs at once, so I will dive into the river and swim to the far bank. This is a typically linear affair from Ian Livingstone, but what I will say is that the choices feel really good and well judged. Although it is linear, I do feel as though most of the choices are impactful and feel appropriate. There's been a lot of times when I've really not been at all clear about what would be the best course of action. This is another one. It might be that I could engage this centaur leader in single combat or something and deal with the encounter that way, or maybe there is no honour among centaurs and they would just murder me out of hand. So it is hard to decide. They've got like bows and arrows on the picture. At least one of them has got bow and arrow. So they may be about to throw spears and arrows at me as I try and swim to the far bank, but we'll see. You run down to the riverbank and dive into the cold water just as the centaurs are about to close in on you. They do not follow you into the river, but watch on, jeering and banging their weapons against their shields. You swim as fast as you can and notice a disturbance in the water as something glides under the surface towards you. Test your luck. Alright, I won't use the lucky charm. I think that's best saved for when my luck's been diminished significantly more. So I'm going to roll against my luck of 9. I get a 7. First die came up a 6. That was a dicey moment, as they say. But then the second one was a 1, so it was fine. I am lucky. Luck now 8. You are relieved to see the ripples in the water are being caused by a shoal of fish swimming upstream against the current. You swim on without stopping and climb out of the water onto the grassy bank. You raise your sword in a defiant gesture to the centaurs who turn and gallop off to find someone else to rob. You take off your backpack to dry yourself off and look inside it to see if anything was lost in the river. Nothing is missing except for 4 of your provisions, which have been washed away. Oh no, I was looking forward to that. So we've lost 4 provisions, taking us down to 3. Oh dear, this is looking very, very poor. So I think all I've got left now is some spaghetti hoops, a Wall's Viennetta and a bottle of Baby Sham. That is, I mean, it's a lovely meal, but that's only 12 stamina available to me since I didn't take the potion of stamina. And you need to lose 1 luck point as well. So luck now down to 7. This is burning through my luck, this book. The sun is beginning to drop in the late afternoon sky behind you as you set off east again, eager to reach Hamelin before nightfall. You pick up the pace when you see a small town in the distance. The dwellings are mainly overhanging timber-framed houses, and there are a few taller buildings beyond. To your right, there are farm workers toiling away in the fields, digging up carrots and potatoes and loading them into carts. There is an old graveyard to your left with weathered gravestones crammed together in rows surrounding a large vine-covered stone tomb. So we can go and have a look at the gravestones or examine the tomb, or we can walk straight into Hamelin. Now, I do have the vampire sword, so I'm less concerned about undead than I might otherwise be. Let us have a look at the gravestones first and see if there's any clues to be found there. The graveyard is neglected and overgrown with weeds and ivy. Some gravestones are broken, while others are covered with moss, their engravings hidden or eroded. You pass by 3 marble headstones that were laid in more recent times and are still legible. The first is that of Indigo Asgard, a pig farmer who died at the age of 42. The second pays tribute to Rivera Knopf, a violin maker who was 61 when she died. And the third is the headstone of Velma Om Yash, a basket weaver who died aged 43. Now, I think that we were looking for a member of the Om Yash family. So I think there might be some mileage in noting down this section, in case any of these tombstones proves to have useful information. I'm always suspicious of tombstones that make a point of specifying the age of the people when they died in this fashion. It feels as though any one of these could be a paragraph we could be asked to turn to. Also, shout out to Ian Livingstone for coming up with even more heroic names than I've managed to come up with. Rivera Knopf is a great heroic name. Let's now examine the tomb. The tomb is built of sandstone, which has turned black over time. There are carved stone gargoyles on each of the 4 corners of the flat roof and broken steps which lead down to a wooden door almost hidden by the thick vines. You walk down the steps and cut away the vines with your sword to reveal a handle which turns in your hand. The door is wedged shut, blocked at the bottom by dirt and debris, but you manage to barge it open with your shoulder. You stare into the musty-smelling tomb, your eyes trying to adjust to the near darkness. You step inside and walk slowly towards a stone sarcophagus which lies in the middle of the tomb. You feel a cold draught of wind on your neck and spin round to see a shadowy figure in a long and ragged black gown hovering over the stone floor. Its face, but for its glowing red eyes, is hidden by a large hood. "Welcome. I've waited a long time for this moment," it says in a hissing whisper. Vicious long claws suddenly appear from out of its baggy sleeves as the wraith glides forward to attack you. You draw your sword quickly to defend yourself. The wraith has a skill of 10 and a stamina of 8, and if you possess a vampire sword, add 2 to your attack strength for each attack round, which is handy because that will give me an effective skill of 11. This is a tough fight, especially given that I lost some skill in Firetop Mountain. There is a picture of the wraith. It's pretty good. The long flowing robes sort of swirling around in a way that's pretty dynamic. It's one of those where it kind of looks a little bit like a evil version of a genie, you could say, only wearing like dark, ragged robes. It's got that kind of coiling up smoke vibe going for it. But yeah, it's a pretty solid bit of work. I cannot believe that I've been recording for getting on for an hour. Well, that'll be less than an hour for you once I've cut out all of the awkward pauses and all the times I completely failed to say words right. But yeah, almost an hour on my side of the equation, and we've not had a fight yet in an Ian Livingstone book. That is basically unprecedented. Anyway, regardless, for the first time and possibly last time this adventure, I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Wraith, mostly thanks to the Vampire Sword. There were quite a few drawn combat rounds in there, which the Wraith would have won, but for the +2 bonus. I took a number of knocks in the fight and was reduced to 15 stamina. All that remains of the Wraith is its long gown lying in a crumpled heap on the stone floor. Do you want to open the sarcophagus? Would you rather leave town and go into Hamelin? I will open the sarcophagus. Surely there must be something of worth in here. I need to find magic items. This feels like exactly the sort of place that you would find a magic item. You grip the sarcophagus lid and push it with all your might and manage to slide it back halfway. You see a skeleton lying inside, encased in a suit of plate mail armour. The body armour appears to be too big for you, but the gauntlet on the skeleton's right hand looks like it could be a good fit. There is also a leather pouch clutched in the fingers of the skeleton's left hand, and a sword with a claw-shaped pommel held in its right hand. Right, now then. Some of these surely are going to be good, some of them are surely going to be bad. Oh, Ian Livingstone, this is a classic adventurer's dilemma. I feel as though the gauntlet surely must be fine. You slide the gauntlet from the skeleton's arm and slowly pull it onto your own arm. It fits perfectly and you feel pleased with your new armour. But the gauntlet is cursed and will reduce your sword fighting ability as it did to its previous owner. It is the classic thing, like the guy buried in the cursed armour got him killed. Or her. Can't tell from a skeleton, obviously. Lose 2 skill points and 1 luck point. Skill now 7, luck now 6. This is awful. Do you want to take the sword or the pouch? Yeah, sure, I'll take the sword. What's the worst that can happen? You have found a dragon sword, which has the sharpest blade you've ever seen in your life. Make a note on the adventure sheet if you want to exchange it for your own sword. Okay, yeah, that's a good way of getting the old dragon sword. Oh, it was a fire sword last time, wasn't it? I think I'll exchange that. It feels as though maybe the vampire sword has already been used up effectively. Maybe that's the only undead you're going to find in the whole of the book. Do we want to take the pouch as well? Sure, why not? You uncurl the skeleton's brittle fingers and take the pouch, which feels like it contains some metal objects. Do you want to open the pouch or not? I do, yes. Yes, I do. You untie the string binding and pour the contents of the pouch into your hand. Nestling in the palm of your hand are 3 small human-shaped skulls, one made of gold, one made of silver, and one made of brass. There are 3 small bones, perhaps from a bird, engraved with tiny symbols. You put the objects back in the pouch and decide what to do next. I think the only thing we can do now is head straight on to Hamelin. You follow a dirt track through a gated stone archway into Crown Street, which is a narrow cobbled road lined with old buildings. There is a guard with a dented helmet and chainmail armour leaning on his spear by the main gate, but he pays you no attention as he slowly munches on an apple. He looks half asleep. You see people going about their business, some carrying baskets, others wheeling wooden barrows along the bumpy road. Everybody looks happy, chatting and laughing together in the warm early evening sun. A shifty-looking juggler in a red and green silk costume and wearing a fool's cap and silk slippers curled up at the toes starts dancing around you, tossing wooden balls in the air, hoping that you might drop a coin into the tin cup on his belt. Absolutely not. There's no way I am giving money to a juggler. You walk past him, straight into the path of a long-haired young woman who is dressed in a shin-length burgundy gown, with long flared sleeves and brown boots. A dagger is tucked into her belt and she has a leather purse slung across her shoulders. She stands in front of you, hands on hips, and says with a beaming smile, "Welcome to Hamelin. My name is Binny Brogan, and it would be my pleasure to give you a tour of the town. Just 1 gold piece is all I ask. I'll make sure you find a place to stay, if you're planning on staying, that is. What do you say? Do you want to pay Binny 1 gold piece for a tour of Hamelin, or would you rather politely refuse her offer and walk on?" Well, there is a picture of Binny Brogan and the crusty juggler, who does indeed look like a crusty juggler. It's a good bit of work. She looks very streetwise, I would say. She's standing with a very confident air, one hand outstretched, and a sort of knowing look on her face, and the buildings behind her are really nicely rendered, crowding in, giving you that sense of verticality and also that sort of tumble down, not quite properly built medieval building style. Yeah, it's really good. Really good. But I think that is probably as good a point as any to call a halt. It feels as though we've kind of done the first act proper of the adventure. And I think rather than pause midway through the next act, I think we'll stop there instead. I've had a really interesting time with Shadow of the Giants so far. It's well written enough. Again, Ian Livingstone making sure that the books do remain children's books at heart, which I very much approve of. The artwork as well, very appropriate for a children's book. I feel like the choices are some of the better choices that he's offered in recent memory. The overall plot I really like, summoning like a bunch of giants that are clearly going to cause carnage. That might be because I've watched like 9 kaiju movies in the last couple of weeks. Maybe more than that, maybe 10. And I'm just really into the idea of big things smashing stuff at the moment. So that plays to my wheelhouse as well. It is very linear, but it feels less oppressively linear than some of the Ian Livingstone books I've played. So that's nice as well. So yeah, overall, I'm having a good time with this. I knew what to expect going in. It is delivering a decent version of the thing I was already expecting. I'm going to go away. I'm going to play it on my own time. I'll be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. I have finished Shadow of the Giants. My first playthrough ended in the town of Hamelin as I blundered around getting involved in a pie-eating contest and spending most of my money on a rigged Dwarf Lucky Dip game that cost me 2 luck when the best prize turned out to be cursed. It was almost a relief to get beaten to death shortly thereafter by a trio of troll footpads. I finished the adventure with a skill of 7 and a luck of 3, which is almost certainly the lowest luck I've ever managed to get, which feels like an achievement of a sort, although not one I'll be telling my hypothetical children about. Shadow of the Giants is quite a hard book to review in isolation because taken on its own there's not that much to say about it. It's a fairly linear fantasy gamebook with some good encounters along the way that finishes strong. It's not doing anything mechanically or structurally unique, it's simply a fun time. However, for those of us who have played through every fighting fantasy book to get to this point, there's quite a lot of detail that does bear examination. Firstly, this is very much an Ian Livingstone book. You'll be having the adventure he's written and no other. You'll be collecting many items along the way. I think I had around 25 on my successful playthrough. There are a few that are required to win and more that are handy to have. You'll be making some friends along the way, whether you want to or not. It is definitely lying about being able to win with the worst stats. You know what to expect going into Shadow of the Giants, and you're unlikely to be surprised by what you find in the 400 sections of this book. However, if you're a hardened adventurer, you might begin to notice a few things that maybe aren't quite as you would expect. Firstly, the difficulty is lower than many of Ian Livingstone's previous books. I had assumed that my fighting dice would be exhausted from all the rolling by the end of the book, but there's way fewer combat encounters than in his previous work. You're still going to want a decent starting skill, and a high luck certainly won't hurt, but the difficulty of the fight tops out at 10, and none of the opponents are particularly tanky. For the toughest monsters, you can generally find an item that's going to make things easier. As we saw, the Wraith can be helpfully slain with the aid of a vampire sword. There's a two-headed snake monster that's vulnerable to the serpent sword, and for the final showdown with the Iron Giants, the dragon sword that you can find in the Wraiths 2 is extremely handy. There's a trade-off in there as well. The two-headed snake monster is arguably the most dangerous foe you'll face, since one bite may mean death by poison, but the serpent sword is less helpful against the Iron Giants in the finale. There's a definite pleasure to be had in puzzling out what the best loadout is for each of the mandatory encounters, and it adds a layer of meta-strategy that you don't always get in an Ian Livingstone book. The two-headed snake monster also features a neat way of dealing with having an NPC along for the ride. You fight the monster as normal, but the NPC deals a flat 1 stamina point of damage each turn, regardless of the outcome. You don't get many combat tricks from Ian Livingstone, but this is a good one. It's simple, and it's effective, and it's evocative. I beat this book on a 4th attempt playing semi-honestly, in that I generated a rather stronger character than average because I'd assumed the book would feature at least one brutal combat before the finish, and I got quite a long way through the book on my 3rd attempt and didn't want to throw it all away at the last hurdle. And actually, that feels like the sweet spot for me in terms of fighting fantasy difficulty for more linear affairs. I don't mind playing books a lot if there's a lot of different routes to take, but linear books need to be beatable fairly quickly because wading through exactly the same encounters each time does get old quickly. The challenge here is ideal for me, and the fact that there's this metagame involving choosing the right sword is symptomatic of a book that just feels like it's had a bit more thought than usual put into the design. And I do think this is one of Ian Livingstone's better books in terms of balance. There's a sense of overall structure, which makes sense, and that's not something you always get with his work. Sure, it's linear, but on this occasion, exploring the different options felt a lot more satisfying to me. It's one where the devil is in the details. You might be able to find every encounter, but it'll take a few goes to find the best way through each encounter. A good example is the ferryman from Firetop Mountain who, spoilers, you actually need to kill. It would normally feel counterintuitive to kill a humble ferryman, but those who remember Warlock of Firetop Mountain will know that he's actually a were-rat, a creature of evil, and that means that killing him is absolutely fine, according to the transactional morality of traditional fantasy gaming. It's a neat touch, and I'd personally completely forgotten that the ferryman could turn into a were-rat in the original gamebook. So nice to go back and have a little rummage through Warlock of Firetop Mountain to make sure that the ferryman there could turn into a were-rat, which indeed he can. The book isn't without a smidge of Ian Livingstone's signature cruelty. There's plenty of places where a wrong decision can lead to a loss of skill, which always feels brutal. He does love presenting the player with a tempting choice like sticking your hand in a hole or robbing a dead body of a cursed gauntlet. Here, that sadism is balanced by an equal number of opportunities to gain skill or bonuses to attack strength, and as I said before, the fights are relatively few and entirely manageable. The final fight proper is a tussle with a Gorgon, and while she's keen to turn you into stone, there's multiple items that will make that less of an issue, and even if you don't have any of the items, you only need to survive 3 attack rounds of tussling with a snake-haired statue enthusiast, and then you need to pass a luck test in order to survive. This is insanely generous by Ian Livingstone's standards, and while I think that it perhaps errs on the side of making a Titanic battle a little bit too easy, there's still a reward for having exactly the right tool to deal with the Gorgon properly. The actual finale where you take on the Iron Giants is quite interesting. I'm not sure that it entirely works, but there's a lot more narrative than most of Ian Livingstone's finales, as you dart about trying to place rust beetles on the ankles of Iron Giants with the aid of a handy NPC. The rust beetles eat away at the Iron Giants, weakening their ankles so you can fell them with your sword. Which sword you wield will have an impact on how easy that is, and assuming you manage it, there's one last item check to get past before victory. It's typical of Ian Livingstone that this mandatory item is absolutely not one of the ones you'd expect to be required to beat the game. I really like that this plays out as a series of discrete rolls interspersed with choices. There's scope for losing a chunk of skill in the early portion of the confrontation, which can have a potentially huge impact for less skilled characters, but can be offset somewhat by having the best sword for the job. It's got a suitably epic feel and tells a proper story in a way that a skill and stamina block simply doesn't. It's perhaps too reliant on killing you if you fail any of the critical rolls, but if that wasn't the case, I'd probably be complaining about the stakes not being high enough for the climactic encounter. You can't win with people like me. The book is also just a hair less linear feeling than some of Ian Livingstone's work. The centre of the book is the town of Hamelin, which features a little bit of freedom to walk about the place as you choose, though you will still get funneled to the most important locations. I don't want to oversell this, you're still on a one-way track pointed straight to the end of the adventure, but in Hamelin it'll take a few different playthroughs to find all the different encounters within the walls of the town. Ian Livingstone is very comfortable in this kind of milieu, and even though he's never managed to top Port Blacksand as an urban environment, Hamelin has a fun selection of things to do. There's nothing truly unique going on here. There's a lot that's been recycled from previous books, even down to a pie-eating competition. Nonetheless, Ian Livingstone has a knack for fantasy riffs on a medieval market town, and if Hamelin doesn't see him stretch himself, then that doesn't mean it's not fun. Its biggest weakness is perhaps the relatively low stakes. While Hamelin is a nice enough place to ramble around, it doesn't have the omnipresent sense of threat that characterised places like Port Blacksand or Carre, city port of traps. There's plenty of oddball characters to meet, and of course, the ever-present threat of minor larceny, but trying to find a reclusive warrior to just pump him for information doesn't have a strong sense of urgency, nor does Hamelin ever develop much of a sense of a unique character. It's a perfectly pleasant medieval market town to explore, but it never feels more than that. You are perhaps inevitably going to be doing a lot of shopping, and that's potentially something fairly tiresome. I've got to the point now where if there's more than one list of things to buy, I just don't get any of them on my first playthrough, and wait to find out which ones turn out to be useful later. Shopping trips have become so oppressive to me that I'm now prepared to torpedo my chances of beating a book on the first playthrough, rather than try and guess which gewgaw or unguent will turn out to be required. As we close in on finishing off the entire Fighting Fantasy series, I've reached the conclusion that choosing between 2 purchase options is thrilling, 3 is exciting, and more than 5 is an imposition. I think this is something that works better in open world books where you can go back later to buy stuff if it turns out you need it. I think everyone has their slightly irrational bugbears in game books, and it turns out mine are mapping and shopping, and by this point I'd far rather map than shop. I think there's only been a handful of times I've really enjoyed a shopping trip, with Spellbreaker's Holy Relics standing out as the best single shopping experience in the whole series, since it's both novel and entirely appropriate for that book. Hamelin's shops are the usual mixture of the relatively mundane and the obviously magical, though at least one is enlivened by the shopkeeper pretending to be a zombie for his own amusement, which is a truly bizarre way to drum up custom. The thing we really need to talk about, though, is the pie-eating contest. This is a fairly routine encounter in which you compete with a barbarian to consume a variety of pies. It's ultimately resolved with a simple luck test, with a whopping 2 gold pieces and a night's accommodation in the inn on the line. What makes it fascinating is the way in which it fails to engage with the provision system and highlights some of the absurdities of healing via the consumption of food. In order to win the pie-eating contest, you have to eat 5 pies. For this Herculean feat of gustatory excess, you gain 2 stamina points. This is absurd according to the standard rules of Fighting Fantasy for a couple of reasons. The first is that almost all Fighting Fantasy characters are astonishingly good at eating. The rules in the book state that you can eat only 1 meal at a time, but there's no mechanics specifying what at a time actually means. This book doesn't even specify that you can't eat a meal during combat, which raises the possibility of chowing down on a heavy meal between each combat round. According to the rules of the game, it ought to be completely trivial for a Fighting Fantasy character to eat 5 pies. They could eat 5 pies whilst fighting a Gorgon with their eyes closed. Secondly, a portion of provisions heals you for 4 stamina. At the very least, a pie-eating contest should reward you with 4 stamina, and there's an argument for saying that it should reward you with 20 stamina, considering you've essentially eaten 5 meals at a single sitting. Elsewhere in Hamelin, you can get a selection of buns, totaling 4 buns, each of which provides 1 stamina point, which means that eating 4 buns is better for you than eating 5 pies, which doesn't really make any sense. Indeed, if you came into the pie-eating contest with low stamina, you might want to pause before, during, or after the contest to eat provisions to regain some stamina, which is frankly insane. Like, you eat 5 pies and go, ooh, I only got 2 stamina out of that. I'm going to eat a couple of portions of provisions just on top of the 5 pies in order to heal myself properly. Now, this is mostly just silly fun, poking at the absurdities of the rules as written, and the curious ways in which they can interact to create absurdities even beyond the idea of a heavy meal being not only a good treatment for a stab wound, but in many cases the only treatment available for a stab wound. However, I think there's a game design lesson in there, which is that bespoke systems which build on existing rules are better than those that contradict or invalidate those existing rules. One thing you might do in a fighting fantasy style gamebook, for example, is make the pie eating contest laughably easy in order to poke fun at the fact that the rules as written allow for truly heroic ingestion of food without mechanical consequence. Another approach might have been to check how many provisions a player has remaining and penalise them in the pie eating contest based on how many meals they've already eaten that day. That would also be pretty cool. All rules create absurdities because all rules are attempts to boil down complex and unpredictable behaviours into something simple. It's like how in some versions of D&D your eyesight improves with age because age grants a wisdom bonus and wisdom is used for perception checks. You can tie yourself in knots trying to make it so that your gamebook makes mechanical sense, but some stuff will always slip through the cracks, and honestly that's fine. You can tell provisions are something of a problem though, because different writers have tried different approaches to iterating on them from a mechanical perspective, whether that be by trying to control when you can eat provisions to stop you scarfing down 4 meals in quick succession, or moving provisions towards a hunger mechanic where you're more penalised for not eating than rewarded for heavy scoffing. It's one of those odd mechanics that's never quite felt ripe, and it feels ripe for alteration for that reason. Shadow of the Giants does use provisions in a different way that works quite nicely, which is to treat them as a resource that can be penalised. There's places you can lose provisions, usually by getting yourself all wet. This is something we've seen before in books like Island of the Undead, which treated provisions as a resource that could be manipulated. In Shadow of the Giants, losing provisions is also a handy hint that you might have screwed up somewhere along the way. The last thing I want to touch on with regard to provisions is whether they are a good mechanic even if you strip away the narrative theming of consuming food to regain health. Is giving the player, at character creation, 10 discrete sources of healing that add 4 stamina entirely at the discretion of the player a good system for a gamebook? And I'm not sure that it is. It's essentially a second health bar which adds 40 stamina to the character's total, with the restriction that you can't have more than your initial stamina going into any individual fight. As an approach, it interacts less than helpfully with the combat system because it tends to make slightly challenging fights less impactful. Without access to healing, the loss of between 2 and 6 stamina has a big impact on the game, but with so much healing available, it's only really big stamina losses that have an impact, and the nature of the fighting fantasy combat system is that a fight with the potential to cause really big stamina loss also has the potential to kill you outright. In other words, the kinds of fight that make spending provisions feel really relevant are also the kinds of fight that are likely to make provisions irrelevant by killing you before you can use them. Basically, in a game where you have a stat like stamina which drains away over the course of the adventure, it's a good idea to make healing rare in order to preserve a sense of jeopardy, and in a gamebook especially, you're doing yourself a disservice if your main source of healing is external to the story. It basically takes away the possibility of using healing as a reward within the structure of the adventure. If you take away the provision mechanic, it allows you to do things like reset the player's health at the end of an act when they can rest and recuperate as part of the narrative. It opens up a bunch of design space to manipulate health in all sorts of ways. Giving the player a huge reservoir of healing before they've even started takes all of that off the table. Provisions are a bit rubbish, basically, and it's not just because of the theming. One thing that Ian Livingstone does really enjoy doing is forcing you to make friends. You do that twice in this book, once in a way that makes sense and once in a way that feels like something of an imposition. The first time is when you need a dwarf to help you in Firetop Mountain. This feels entirely sensible in context, and the book finds a way to force you to choose one specific dwarf that works by having the other one be wildly unreliable, as we saw in the playthrough. You've hired a dwarf for a specific job, and it all feels like a very sensible adventuring decision. Although Firetop Mountain itself is probably the single biggest disappointment in the whole adventure, being little more than a single room with a chest in it. I do think it would have been good to try and find a little more space for that portion of the adventure, but that's small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, and Higley the dwarf does at least do the decent thing by expiring very quickly once he's done being useful. The second friend you are forced to make is a ranger nicknamed Goose, who will be with you for the duration of the final stages of the adventure. And this one feels much more of an imposition to me, since the text tries to make out that teaming up with him is optional, only to straight up murder you for no reason if you decide to take a pass on chumming up. It feels very much as though Ian Livingstone has decided that you're going to have a friend along, and if you don't like it, then tough. Goose isn't the most aggravating of companions, not by a long shot, but I still don't like him. I think from natural contrariness as much as anything. As someone with a fairly solitary bent, I resent being forced to make friends with people. I am not by nature a gregarious person. It's interesting that I didn't have nearly the same problem with Higley the Dwarf, perhaps because his inclusion feels boundaried and fundamentally transactional. You spend a lot more time with Goose, and I had the constant nagging feeling that he was stealing my thunder in what should have been the most exciting moments of the story. Perhaps, selfishly, I wanted to feel like I had saved the world. I didn't want it to feel like a team effort. There's nothing wrong with saving the world being a team effort. There's a great gamebook in doing the Magnificent Seven thing and putting a team together to deal with an outsized threat you can't handle alone. However, the premise of fighting fantasy has always been you are the hero, not you and your mate. It also becomes very obvious as the book reaches its conclusion just how optional Goose isn't. I realised from the sheer number of sections in which he appeared that there was no likelihood of being able to do the finale without him, nor any way for him to get killed along the way. I could die, but this ragged ranger was effectively immortal, and that also rankled. Overall, I do think Shadow of the Giants is one of the better late-stage Ian Livingstone books. Probably Assassins of Allansia is the best of his later work, but Shadow of the Giants isn't far off at all. It's better designed than many of his books, it's quite welcoming, the art is pretty good, and I do like how very British it feels, in the sense that while the whole of Allansia might be threatened by the Iron Giants, you're still tramping around the countryside and then wandering about in a medium-sized market town for much of the plot. The stakes are high, but the setting is definitely quotidian. It's also cheap to get hold of, and that's always nice to report. That is all for this episode. I've got a very busy September coming up, so I'm not sure what that's going to mean in terms of the September bonus episode. It might mean that I do the next Fighting Fantasy book at the start of September because it's a chunky hardcover, and I don't want to be lugging that about with me on my travels. There will still be 2 episodes of the podcast in September, but we'll have to see exactly what form that takes. If anyone wants to recommend something available in digital format to play, then please do get in touch with me via email at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, at gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky at hjdoom. If you like what I do and want to support me financially, then you can do so by going to patreon.com/hjdoom and pledging as little as £1 in exchange for every gamebook I've ever written and the warm glow that comes from knowing you're keeping the bonus episodes coming for everyone. I'm working on a new gamebook as well, and I hope to be able to reveal more details in the next couple of weeks. All support is most gratefully received. If you don't want to spend cash on my nonsense, which is fine, but would like to lend a hand, then a review, a rating, or simply telling a friend is a great way to do exactly that. This has been a production of Doom Industries. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.